In this way, through getting used in various ways in a life of fits and starts, the means of the body are exhausted. Eventually, the body gets sick, aged, and becomes obsolete. The being is obliged to continue its development in meal years that have possibilities beyond the limit of that body's sufficiency. In this case, again with the help of the beings in duty, the old body is abandoned. The being is elevated to the circumstances of the higher stage. For this, the being leaves the world by the event of death. From that moment on, that is, at the initial moments of his transition to the spatium, all secondary influences coming from his surroundings are ceased, except for the influences coming from its own spirit. That being is left completely alone in an isolated state within its own being. This situation is akin to the state of a man who has been put into a room and left there after all of his senses have been removed, so that he is even senseless to his own body. We say akin, because spatium life expresses a much more profound and internal loneliness. Therefore, spatium life is not a space for the beings. At that moment, their space is only their beings. Because of this, at the being's initial transition there, it is not possible for it to contact, speak and meet the world, the superworld or the beings around him who are similar to him. All connections to his surroundings are severed. This is for natural reasons arising out of the being's state of heavy selfishness, as well as imperatives on which we will elaborate below. This state, after it continues as long as needed, is abolished by the influences that start to come from the surroundings, and the being begins to recognize his surroundings, identity and needs with his awakened comprehension by means of these influences. After death, the being naturally becomes free, but if it cannot yet complete all preparatory application of the plan of duty in the world, it is not deemed as having completed the stage of humanity. Because of this, although it has left the body, that being is still at the stage of human. For, no matter what, it has to return to the world in order to finish its unfinished business. And until he completes the preparatory applications there, its habitat will be the world, in the communal plan, mankind. So, the human being who has passed there, that is, who is isolated from all influences when it dies, has to spend some time in the spatium. There is a significant reason for this. A being, after rendering the application of its plan pertaining to the world life, needs to make an accounting of its assets, to completely absorb and appropriate them. For this, it needs to retreat for a while, to turn to its essence knowledge, that is, to do an accounting of them, by comparing the knowledge it acquired in the last world life with its former knowledge. We previously said that mankind accumulates their assets in the world in their unconscious while they sleep. And, following death, the being's entering into a state of isolation by severing its connections to the surroundings, allows it to do the necessary applications for comfortably digesting all of this knowledge. Therefore, the spatium life is a profound and fundamental moment for contemplation and accounting for the being. And one of the reasons for inserting intervals called death into the human life that continues across a whole world cycle, is to ensure this possibility. Here, the most perfect application of the knowledge of comparison is done. For, during that time, the being is not disturbed by the realities coming from the surroundings, and the conscience mechanism which works freely finds the opportunity and possibility of making bitter and sweet comparisons of all the accumulated knowledge, and appropriating their conclusions to the essence being. So, in order to assist this application, all outside influences are ceased at the moments following death. There is no influence which can occupy and pull out its comprehension. The beings in duty prevent this. Nevertheless, it is still under the complete control of the plan of duty. If the coming of some influences to it from below is seen as necessary for its accounting and contemplation, this can be done only under the approval and control of the beings in duty. That is, the deceased X cannot get in touch whenever he wishes with his friend A who stayed in the world. This act is either permitted or not, in accordance with the very minute calculations pertaining to the contemplation and accounting of X during that time. When not permitted, then no power can allow its contacting mankind. A being who passed to the spatium cannot communicate with other beings like itself for an initial period of time as well. This is due to permission with the above-mentioned rules. 4. There is no arbitrary thing over there. Everything is accrued under the very carefully planned control of the plan of duty. In the same way, as the minutest needs and imperatives have been calculated when it was alive, the necessities of the deeds following death are done in the same way. When the being who passed to the spatium does not receive influences from the world and its surroundings, it is compulsorily left alone with the impressions of images existing in itself, and starts to live within them. This state is like a very deep and powerful dream. However, this living is not for pleasure or suffering. Even if there are pleasures and sufferings during that time, the real purpose is the beings appropriating the acquisitions that have been gained in the world, by the knowledge of comparison. And there, the completely free working of the developmental mechanism, under the control of the plan of duty, drags the being to the compulsory synthesis and analysis, which are done most often by suffering knowledge of comparison. In the meantime, because there are no mitigating influences of surroundings, painful emotions, arising out of the comparison and increased thousands of times more than in the world, put the being into tribulation. And knowledge can only become digested as essence knowledge after such an intense settling of accounts. Thus, all results are received. During this settling of accounts, since some very surprising situations for the being may occur, we call this the being's state of confusion. As we have said, this contemplation and accounting do not always, even most often, pass at ease and calm. Especially at the initial periods of the transition, it occurs generally together with states of uneasiness, intense suffering, torment, heavy confusion, and bewilderment. Depending on the imperatives and necessities of the contemplation and accounting, more or less easy states may also occur. Sometimes, it may be turbulent to the extent of hellish torment. After the being has gone through so many confusions, and the accounting of its acquisitions, and has digested its knowledge, the assisting influences from above start to reach it again. It also receives influences from the surroundings. Thanks to all of these, it starts to get free of the confusion and bewilderment, and recognizes itself and its surroundings, and starts to think about its future with its expanded comprehension. It appreciates the degree of its gains and losses, and starts to feel the need of returning to the world for completing his deficiencies. If this need is necessary to be fulfilled, the beings in duty who appreciate this, immediately get ready to assist it by the directives coming from above. And they start out to arrange and regulate the most necessary and beneficial individual and communal plan for it. It is willingly bonded to this plan. For, it appreciates that his salvation will be ensured only by the application of this plan. Therefore, it promises to be faithful to this plan in the world, and upon this promise, it embodies in the world as we previously explained. When embodied, since it will again be under the rule of the superficial time, all riches in it that belong to the comprehension of the spherical time are erased. And all of these are cast away to the subconscious. The comprehension subjecting to superficial time begins to live in the world within new circumstances. And besides the impressions remaining from the spatium, the help of the beings in duty will support it in the world, and guide it in the application of this plan. In this way, lives will follow each other, and with each coming of the man, as his essence knowledge and comprehension increases, his possibilities and imperatives for shifting to the higher parts of the realities at the conscience mechanism increase as well. Since the conscience equilibrium will start to be set on the higher levels from now on, the bitter sides of the accounting in the spatium after death gradually decrease. There is a rule here. The more comprehension is expanded, the shorter the period of the isolation state in the spatium, because the faster the accounting needed to be done there is completed. A man that lives in the world should know, above else, what his duty is, about what he prepares for, from where he comes and where he goes to, and especially, how to behave according to the concepts of good and evil, in the sense we have just described. And unless he knows these, there will be neither a necessity nor possibility to rise upwards, to the plan of duty. For, as long as he stays in this state, there is no deed for him to do in the plan of duty. For this, he needs to be prepared for the necessities of the higher plan, and to return many times to the world within various links of the chain of embodiments. It is impossible to accept that a man whose comprehension works merely in automatic ways while doing even the simplest deeds, could immediately attain the power to grasp the relations of the universal events and matter combinations, on the face of the causality principle and sublime necessities, and could reach the scope of capability to conduct the sublime deeds of the vast realms, by comprehending all responsibilities of them at the end of a world incarnation of 50, 60 years. Seeing that, even the comprehension of the most hard-working man develops throughout the whole life, with the speed of an ant, it is a mistake to think that, attaining such a universal comprehension is possible within a few world lives. Therefore, the beings attaining the merit of a complete knowledge of duty is possible only after completion of the rings of the chain of lives, which are passed on in the human body for tens of thousands of years in the world.